You're listening to the Valley Current.
Hey, Myron, how you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Okay.
Good. I really appreciate you coming into this discussion because we have such an unprecedented activity going on right now with former President Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But let's spend a little bit of time on Trump and then we can go to some other topics because ChatGPT summarized the indictment, 49 pages, and they thought it did a pretty good summary citing to the various federal criminal code sections and providing little snippets of information. Obviously, it's not a lawyer and it's not a law clerk, but I was kind of surprised at how well it did the summary in less than a page.
Smith did this, huh?
ChatGPT generated the summary.
Oh, okay.
So I just sent you that summary because I don't know if you had time to read that 49-page indictment, but it's very detailed and with photographs. I mean, it's a story. I mean, they think the allegations are all there to prove every element of those crimes. And I have to tell you, if I were him, if I were Donald Trump, I wouldn't be too happy about all the braggadocio that he's done, including on video and audio recordings that tend to show that he knew that his retention of those documents was wrongful.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to say, he's kind of his own worst enemy in terms of creating evidence against himself.
Well, yes, but he's got a different agenda.
He's got a different agenda, and you have to wonder, can anyone rein him in saying, Donald, you may end up getting a prison sentence about this, and that is going to be a black mark on you, even if you get a new president, presumably a Republican, and I don't know who that would be, to pardon you at some point in the future. I mean, that to me is like the big picture here, right?
Yeah, he is, but he doesn't have that frame of mind. Partly he does. Obviously he doesn't want to go to prison, but he's got a bigger picture in his mind that normal people don't have.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a picture in his mind that this is all free publicity and is like a good thing to ride the tail of going into the November 2024 elections. Yeah. The first question I have for discussion is there any possibility in your mind that this case could actually go to trial before November of 2024? Because that's got to be a big topic of discussion. Obviously, it won't get decided today, maybe indirectly, because he's going into court with lawyers who say they're not the trial lawyer and that he's still searching for a trial team or a trial lawyer or a lead trial lawyer. And to me, that almost sounds like he's scripting for delay right from the get-go.
Well, I think in trying to predict what's going to happen from Trump's side of things, putting aside for the moment the prosecution and the court, Trump is a unique client, and every attorney he's had that's dealt with him has had to face this problem, and this is partly the reason for the very high turnover he's had with lawyers. Trump's got two things that all of us lawyers wish the clients did not have. One is he's got a political agenda that is at least as important to him as winning the case. And he wants to become president again. And part of his strategy is to attack the Democrats, attack anyone who's against him. And these two prosecutions, the federal one in Florida, the state one in New York, are actually fodder for him to attack his opponents and energize his base. And that's part of his strategy. The big question is, how big is his base and how big will it remain after these things? I personally think to win a presidential election, you have to go beyond your base and get people kind of on the margins who like some things about you but are questionable. And I think these prosecutions might drive those people away. So he's got that dilemma. He's got to keep his base energized, but not alienate those people who are sort of in the middle. The other problem with Trump as a client is his upbringing. I mean, he learned how to deal with the world from Roy Cohn, who was a notorious lawyer, very talented, very skilled, kind of a total jerk, and he was at war with the world. He told Trump, don't ever concede anything, don't admit anything, fight back, blame your enemies, and Trump has consistently done that. And when one of his lawyers says, here's the best strategy to win, Trump will override them. And I think that's going to happen in this case because of those two features of Trump's personality. And he's the client, he calls the shots. And I think we can expect more quarrels with his counsel and perhaps more turnover. So you asked the question, Jack, about whether this would be resolved before the 2024 election. I could see a scenario where they're right on the brink of trial or in the middle of trial, and Trump dumps his lawyers, and they got to get somebody else to start over again, and that throws the whole schedule off. That could easily happen with this guy.
That's the ultimate. That's the ultimate trump card by Trump, which is he does control.
Yeah, I mean, it could be partly a gimmick in order to stall the thing, but it's not totally a gimmick because this is Trump. This is what he does, even if there's an election not pending.
He's got a good foundation for not being able to find a trial lawyer in Florida because he can say, look, I didn't put this in the news. My trial lawyers that I had lined up all quit. Three of them have left. And they basically said we couldn't work with him, more or less. And that's in the news. So he's got the foundation for, hey, I can't force involuntary servitude on people that don't want to work with me. And this is in Florida where he does live now, but he would say, most of my cases have been in New York up to now, because he is a recent full-time resident of Florida relative to going from the White House to Florida as opposed to back to New York. And then the other thing that I'll remark is when you look at kind of the story of what he wants to accomplish, I would assume he sees both the New York case and this federal case as kind of an obstacle for his bigger political ambition, which just means both have to be deferred in whatever way he can get them to be deferred until after the election. Because if he wins the election, he can eventually resign in the third or even fourth year and have his VP provide him a pardon, the way Nixon ended up getting a pardon, right? At least on the federal charges. I don't think the pardon would work on the state charges.
Yeah, there'd be no, he doesn't have the power to pardon on the state charges, just federal. It's just very hard to figure how this whole thing is going to play out. There's a possibility of charges in Georgia too. So where does that fit into this? I recall when Clinton was president and he was sued by Paula Jones, the Supreme Court indicated that we don't want litigation to interfere with the president's performance of his duties, so the trial judge ought to find ways to defer whatever's going on in the trial court till after he leaves office. And I think that's likely to happen if Trump is elected and one or more of these trials isn't completed, because there's no question to my mind that that would be correct. I mean, obviously, going through a criminal trial would interfere with the duties as president. So that's another possibility. I'm not so sure that Trump wants this thing delayed until after the election. I'm not so sure he would think that this hurts him. It just consistently gives him an opportunity to attack his opponents and get his base all riled up. I'm not sure what the man's thinking on this is right now. But I mean, the one thing we know about Trump is he's in charge of his litigation. His orders matter more than most clients. So he's going to be calling the shots, even if it weakens the chances of his winning the case. That's just the way he is. And your point about finding a lawyer, well, yeah, he's got to find a lawyer who accepts that and works within those parameters, and also someone who's a good lawyer. I'm not sure those two things necessarily go together. I mean, Trump wants a lawyer who yells and screams like he does and attacks the opposition. He's, I read a couple articles in the Times about some very sophisticated legal arguments he could make about the search warrant and some other issues. I'm not sure he even wants that, or the lawyer he finds that he gets along with will be capable of making this. So there's so many things about these cases that are different from the usual case. I mean, I've had difficult clients, Jack, I'm sure you have, but I'm also pretty sure neither of us, mature, intelligent, experienced lawyers, could handle a guy like Trump.
No. Even if we collectively have, and we might, close to 100 years of experience, including in both trial and appellate work, the reality is that dealing with a guy like Donald Trump is such a unique experience. And you have to imagine that any lawyer, male or female, that has any type of marriage or significant other in their relationship is going to have to say, I'm dedicating the next year, couple of years, whatever it takes, to defend a guy who basically is almost defenseless when you look at the charges and you look at the evidence, at least in the abstract, without drilling down and getting the discovery and everything else that I'm sure is going to play out. I have to believe that that will have a lasting effect on whether that marriage or significant relationship will continue. And that's a lot for a lawyer to give up, a personal relationship, right?
And you better get cash in advance in this case, too.
Well, that's the other problem. He doesn't really pay, and he thinks people should work for free. And you've got a whole group of people that have been dismissed and had to try to collect their bills, including
he wants you to work for free, and if you won't, he'll stiff you. So you got to worry about that problem too.
I mean, I don't even know how you'd go about estimating the retainer. It seems to me he needs a big firm with a big team that's able to turn over every rock and cranny. It can't be a solo practice lawyer. It can't be a small law firm, but most criminal defense lawyers.
I think they're mostly solos.
Most criminal defense lawyers are solo or in very small firms, and it seems as though he needs a big team of people. Now, maybe he's going to assemble that. But you made an interesting observation to me, I think, over email, which I never fully understood, or I never really saw myself, which is the venue is likely in Florida as opposed to DC, even though there's an argument that the documents were illegally removed from the White House, which is a violation of the Espionage Act, and then illegally retained in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, in the Southern District of Florida. And you said, and I think you're right, that the venue issue is tricky because if you make a mistake, if Jack Smith, the lawyer who's leading up this investigation and these charges and signed off on the indictment, if you make a mistake on venue, you might end up having the whole case thrown out, which would be big risk for him. right?
Yeah, Smith was really in a bind on this one. As you said, there's a whole bunch of charges, but they could be lumped into two categories. One, you took the documents illegally, and two, you obstructed justice by refusing to give them back. Well, the first thing happened in Washington. The second thing happened in Florida. So if you pick the wrong one, then, like you said, there's cases pending that suggest that you've been in double jeopardy. It's done. You can't be tried again. So why not file two cases? File one in Washington, one in Florida. Well, that weakens both cases because Trump took the documents improperly. Well, Biden did that too. That's not that big a deal. But Biden, once he discovered it, he gave them back. He was cooperative. Trump, no, screw you. I'm keeping them. I was the president, blah, blah. I mean, that's where the emotional impact of the case comes.
Right.
And you really want that second part of the first part. And he did those things in Florida. He didn't do those things in D.C., so I'm not sure there's jurisdiction in D.C. That could be a big issue. So Smith decided, I'm going to split them up. Well, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to join them together, but I'm going to put them all in Florida, which has its drawbacks because D.C. is a very democratic area, very liberal. You'd be more likely to get a unanimous jury in D.C. Florida, we all know about. It's very mixed. You could get Trumpies on the jury. It's going to be harder to get a unanimous verdict in Florida. But this is the way he resolved that dilemma. And who am I to question him? I mean, he's out for a victory. He saw that as the safest way to do it. I'm not going to second guess him on that.
No, I think you're right that probably he's going to take the conservative path in terms of every decision that's made in this case, which is try to make sure that no rookie errors are made, try to make sure it looks like Trump is getting an absolute procedurally fair trial. I'd even say it's possible, although there's no evidence to support it, that the reason the judge that ended up assigned to the case is a Trump appointee is because Smith actually wants to win in front of a judge where it can be said, how can Trump complain about this judge? This judge has had a track record of bending over backwards in favor of Donald Trump on some of these issues, and she got reversed by the 11th Circuit. So I don't think he's going to challenge that assignment.
But he had no role in choosing who the judge was going to be. That was we're not sure why she got assigned to it, but Smith didn't have anything to do with that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if he gets a conviction in front of her, that really helps make it bulletproof on appeal. The other thing Smith is doing that's interesting is, these Justice Department types are really, how should I put it? They're stiff, they're legalistic, they're formal. They're excellent lawyers, but they work within the court system, and they consciously try to stay away from dealing with the public at all. And I think Smith knows, or was counseled, you can't totally do that in this case. It's just not going to work. We can't avoid the big elephant in the room that this is about a former president who's running again. Trump is trying this case in the public, and we got to be responsive to that. And this is why the indictment was packed full of evidence, which is not required. It's very unusual. Usually indictments are very dry. They state the basic allegations in broad terms. There's no evidence in there. You don't need it. Not this one. This one lays it out. It talks about admissions that Trump made, hiding documents, the motion he made about plucking out documents. This was designed for the Washington Post and New York Times as much as for the court. And that was a smart thing to do, I think.
right, with pictures, with color pictures, reading like a storybook in a way that's quite different than 99% or more of the federal criminal indictments that you'll see. And I agree with you 100% that that was a conscious decision. They had to make that decision with the view that there would be front page analysis in all the newspapers throughout the world. But I want to go back to something you said a minute ago, which is that in many ways, Trump is in charge of this and clearly wants to control the way in which the public perception goes forward. But he's got to be careful not to be viewed as extreme. And the thought that occurred to me is you may remember that Comey indirectly may have caused Hillary Clinton to lose some credibility over the retention of documents on some computer server that she had and reopening that investigation towards the tail end of her campaign. And the view was that was a discretionary decision that he made where he was trying to be as neutral as possible. And that might have caused that little middle set of voters to swing against Hillary Clinton. We have kind of an analogous situation here where Trump took the documents, let's say like an employee leaving, they make a mistake, and then the employer asks for the documents back. You could argue the government's the employer. The president works for the government in a way. I mean, he leads the government. He's the CEO. He's the president. He's in charge of leading the government. He's the commander in chief. But then they ask for the documents back, and most employees in a trade secret case or a copyright case or another intellectual property case with an ex-employee will just turn them over and cooperate, and there won't even be a case. It'll just be, okay, there was a mistake, you corrected it, mea culpa, let's move on. He does the opposite. He hangs on to the stuff, and then he talks about covering it up with his lawyer, and the attorney-client privilege is breached. Well, in many ways, isn't that sort of an analogous situation, only worse for him in terms of this election? Because if Hillary Clinton is any evidence of that middle set of voters that really want an honest person to be running the government, that middle set of voters, they may just be swung by the fact that there's any charges at all, regardless of the outcome, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting what's happened to America over the last 20 years or so, or since Trump came along, although it's not solely because of Trump. I remember the days when, who was it, Wilbur Mills got kicked out of office because he went swimming in the reflecting pool with some model or something.
Right.
That's peanuts compared to what's going on today. I mean, the kind of things that people got their careers ended for were so petty compared to what Trump is doing. And what's happened is, in psychology, it's called desensitization. Mm-hmm. If I punch you in the arm, you don't like it. But if I keep doing it for an hour or so, you get used to it. And I think the public, especially Trump's base, they know about all of this stuff. This thing with Stormy Daniels, this adultery, these are evangelical Christians, but it keeps happening, keeps lying. And they've got a story to explain it. This is all Democrats making things up, alternative facts, all that. And this is just one more. So the big question is, we're not going to change that regarding his hardcore base. But how big is that middle ground that cares about that stuff, Jack? I mean, it's there. We know it's there. Is it big enough to swing an election? I don't know anymore.
Yeah, I mean, to me.
Or are these people so angry at the Democrats that they'll buy any nonsense just to punish them? I'm kind of looking forward to the primary battle mainly between DeSantis and Trump, and see how hard DeSantis hits Trump on this stuff. That could peel away a lot of these middle ground people. Trump could still win the primary, but they're not going to be excited about him at the general election because of what DeSantis did to him during the primary campaign. That could happen.
Yeah, I keep thinking that DeSantis might end up folding to Trump, and then Trump in turn makes DeSantis VP on the view that DeSantis is going to grant him the pardon in the third or fourth year. I keep thinking there's a scenario like that that somehow consolidates the Republican base in a way that keeps what I think is about 40% of the electorate lined up against Biden. There's like 40% or more that are lined up against Trump. And then that middle is somewhere between, I think, 10 and 20%. It's probably not more than 10, but it could be up to 20. And a lot of what's unfolding in front of our eyes is that swing vote and how they perceive the age issue with Biden versus the, what I'll call the credibility issue or honesty issue in front of Trump. And a lot of what gets played out here, it seems to me, is sort of tied up in that. But I want to go back for a second to this notion of, if you look at all the decisions, I don't know how many thousands of strategic decisions or let's say there's 10 big strategic decisions. One of them we talked about, venue. And there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of tactical decisions that each side is going to be making. And presumably Smith, on behalf of the government, is making all the strategic and probably most of the tactical decisions. That's why you hire, or that's why you bring in someone like him who's tried cases in front of the Hague dealing with corrupt politicians and the like. So he's obviously very savvy to this. And you have to have someone that's savvy to the news cycle as well, as you remarked. And then on the Trump side, if they get the right team with the right leader and the right lawyer, that person's got to make a lot of decisions. And a lot of them will be, as you noted, these pre-trial motion decisions that are trying to prevent certain evidence from being used, because they did get a search warrant that probably is going to be challenged. And probably that's a big pre-trial issue in terms of whether that search warrant is upheld. There's also a co-defendant, and there's probably an issue about that co-defendant and how that co-defendant is being treated, because obviously the government would want that co-defendant to testify ultimately against Trump, that I was just following orders. You know, presumably I didn't make these decisions. I'm not the fall guy here. I'm basically an aide. I was just doing what he told me to do. I thought the lawyers had screened this for validity. I had no idea. I mean, I wouldn't want to be that guy. But if you had to imagine the thousands of decisions that have to be made, do you look at this and say it's incapable of having a single lawyer leader make all these decisions? Or would you say, well, Johnny Cochran did it for O.J. Simpson. He had a team of people behind him. They delegated as appropriate. And, you know, it worked out because, look, he ended up with an acquittal. Trump doesn't really need an acquittal. He just needs a deadlocked jury with even just one juror who effectively nullifies whatever the decision of the other 11 jurors will be in this case, because in federal criminal cases, it's 12 jurors.
Yeah.
Right? Civil, it's 6 jurors.
Well, Trump is a very experienced litigator. He's had cases all over the country with mostly solo lawyers or a couple of lawyers. So, you know, they haven't done well. He was challenging the last election, and that didn't go anywhere. But he's used to using, you know, small groups of lawyers, and I think he'll keep doing it. A couple observations on what you just said. This judge they're going to have, Cannon, you know, she was appointed by Trump. She's been very sympathetic to Trump in prior cases, but she did get slapped down by the Court of Appeal, which included a panel of Trump appointees. She got slapped down pretty hard with some harsh language. So, but these pretrial motions you're talking about, it's almost guaranteed they're going to go up on appeal or in writ. And that's going to slow everything down. So that's another reason why the case is unlikely to be concluded before the election happened. One thing I noticed in the indictment, the talk until the indictment has all been about, oh, he took some documents, he shouldn't have done it. Biden did something similar. Big deal, right? You got a box of documents. Well, I'll tell you what, this one is a big deal. Some of those documents involve nuclear secrets, and others involved other defense-related documents. And there's an allegation he pulled out a map he got from the Defense Department about America's defenses. If I were Jack Smith, that would be my focus. This guy is endangering our country. If he would pull something like that after being president, what the hell is he going to do while he's president? His main job, the most important thing he's doing is keeping this country safe and getting along with allies who are now very upset to find out that defense information they gave to the United States, he now disclosed. So I would zero in on that and pretty much forget about the other documents, which are probably boring stuff that nobody cares about. But everybody cares about defense, Democrat or Republican. And that's the way to get 12 votes on a jury, I think.
So you're indirectly saying where I was sort of suggesting by this tactical, strategic versus tactical set of decisions, Jack Smith decided to include 37 charges based on 37 of the many hundreds of documents. So they obviously selected down a subset. And you're kind of predicting that maybe about 25 or so of those end up getting thrown out the way in which, say, certain alleged trade secrets that are really thin trade secrets get thrown out, as that's going to be a distraction. The core trade secrets are these 12 trade secrets. Let's focus on the core. If we can't win on the core, we can't win on the laundry list. And maybe that's the game that gets played pre-trial, which is trying to force a withdrawal of certain claims so they're much narrower. And then Trump uses that to get his base riled up, and the government effectively gives him that freebie because they want to get that last set of, let's call it a dozen, 10, maybe even less than 10, the way, say, in a patent case, the number of claims are narrowed. In a copyright case, the number of works are narrowed. Basically in a trade secret case, which is the best analogy, there's a narrowing, and you're almost saying, well, the narrowing should be focusing on the nuclear secrets, the third party. These are secrets of third parties, third party countries that trusted us with this. They're pretty upset by what happened. We have egg on our face as a country. This just can't be tolerated. We need a precedent here. But anything else that's sort of like, it was marked confidential, but the Wall Street Journal had talked about it, or the New York Times had talked about it, or you could Google it and it's readily ascertainable. It's very analogous to a trade secret case in that sense. And it might be that even getting this thousands of pages of documents down to just these 37 was a real struggle, because I imagine this indictment started with probably 100 or more, and then they just kind of narrowed it over time. And ultimately,
a broad indictment is it's kind of a menu that the prosecutor has to do whatever they want. They don't have to focus on that stuff, but it gives them a lot of options. And I'm just saying, when it comes to trial, I don't think you want to focus on all of those documents. Yes, you want to paint a picture of a defendant who is so careless and arrogant that he lets everything go out. But the key, I think, is the nuclear defense stuff, both with the jury and the public, because what Republicans are known to care about, defense, and of course Democrats, maybe to a lesser extent, do too. So this cuts across the whole country. So that's what I would do.
Right. You're essentially saying if we had to do a mock trial today of this case, the theme that's the winning theme in your mind is there's a core set of top secret information, both our own and entrusted by third-party countries, that really materially could change the nature of our ability to defend against foreign adverse powers.
Yeah, in other words, this is not a technical crime. This is a real crime.
Right. This is like putting in jeopardy a country that already might be on the precipice of a nuclear war, depending on how you view what Russia is doing in Ukraine. So this is serious business. This is not, oh yeah, he mistakenly photocopied a page out of a notebook that he thought had a love letter in it or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So I want to turn to the second big sort of subtopic here, besides the indictment, which is there was a piercing of the attorney-client privilege. His lawyer had to turn over a bunch of audio and text information that essentially provides an insight into the advice that was given and the advice that was ignored based on what's called the crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege, which is a privilege that exists in all 50 states, whether you say it's a privilege that attached in DC, because I think his lawyer technically at the time was in the District of Columbia, or in Florida for that matter. That's a big issue. And as I recall, that issue was litigated to some degree, and the appellate court agreed that the attorney-client privilege did not protect that information, and it was turned over to the grand jury. I have a curious question, which is, in California, we have a much broader statute under California Business and Professions Code 6068 subpart E that talks about keeping client secrets inviolate at every peril. That's almost the exact language in the statute. Do you think that statute would have otherwise required that lawyer, if he was in California and the privilege was all about the California relationship, do you think it would have required that lawyer to go to jail at the pain of contempt and not turn that information over and said, look, whether it's privilege or not, I don't care, but the statute says that I have to protect my client's secrets, and every piece of communication with him was a client secret.
I forget the name of the lawyer. What was his name?
I think it's Corcoran or something like that. I'll find it. It starts with a C.
Yeah, it's all right. I read about that. I wish I knew more about it. To me, it's the strangest aspect of this whole case. Not something the public is going to care about. But for people like you and me and members of the bar, I think we do care about it. The crime fraud exception is typically invoked. It's not invoked very often, but let's assume you're a lawyer for some mafia group, right? Now, it's perfectly all right for you to represent them in criminal charges that have already happened. There's nothing wrong with that, nothing unethical, nothing criminal. Everything you talk to your client about is all protected, nothing wrong, all right? But if you're having conversations with them and you advise them on how to commit future crimes without getting caught, no, that's not protected. And in fact, you are a co-conspirator and you ought to be punished. One thing I don't understand is the news reports that say this guy Corcoran, who took all these notes about conversations with Trump and his people and was helping them to obstruct justice by keeping these documents away from the government. If that is subject to the crime fraud exception, why is Corcoran himself not being prosecuted? And they've said he's innocent. He didn't know what he was doing. That doesn't make any sense to me. Off the top of my head, I don't understand that. I mean, if the guy's an intelligent lawyer and somebody from outside says you were helping him commit a crime, and he says, I didn't know I was, how is that possible? I don't get that.
Right. And the lawyer's name is Evan Corcoran, Corcoran. And they did get all of his notes as well, which we often call work product, we talk about that as specially protected, like an attorney's notes and impressions about a case. They got that as well. And, he's not, he's a pretty senior lawyer, according to the news reports. I mean, he's not and he's been around. He was born in 1964. I guess that makes him a bit younger than me, but he was a former prosecutor and now he's a white collar criminal defense lawyer. His birthday is coming up. He'll be 59 years old on July 28th. He went to Georgetown University and Princeton, so he's no slouch. And yet,
how would he not know he's helping Trump commit a crime, and yet from the outside, Jack Smith knows? I mean, how does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because you would think he would want to use a lot of care, to me, a tremendous amount of care in how he dealt with this. And he'd probably want to have multiple witnesses as well to support him. Now, maybe the reality is the government put enough pressure on him that they said, if you want to avoid charges, you're going to have to do the right thing and work with us. I mean, I don't know how far this goes, but
you give him immunity. That's okay. I mean, that's done.
Right, but
that's not what happened. They said he's innocent. I don't get that.
So you're saying the government said he's innocent?
That's what I read in the paper. I don't understand it.
And so the government is viewing him as being somewhat
dim. Somewhat dim. Like Georgetown. I don't get it.
Yeah, you think he's actually sort of like just missed the boat on this?
Well,
right?
It's one or the other. Either they're both guilty or neither of them. But I don't see how you let one of them off the hook.
Well, you're saying he could be equally guilty as the co-defendant is, effectively, right?
Yeah.
Because he should have said, at the pain of "I'm going to resign," look, I'm going to resign if you don't turn around and get these documents back. I'm not going to tolerate it, right? I mean, you can't put a gun to Trump's head.
Say, the law doesn't allow you to do this. It's your choice whether to follow my advice or not. I mean, you could do that.
Right. So here's the guy. Here's the guy we're talking about. It's the privilege that existed between him. He's the guy with the white hair. I guess he's got an associate or an assistant on the right there. I mean, this is him, I guess, going in and out of court. These are his pictures. He's in his 50s. He's going to be 59 on July 28th. These are the boxes that we're talking about. There are a lot of them. I would assume he personally was aware and probably should have visited to look at what was inside the boxes. But, he doesn't have a top secret clearance, so maybe things would have gotten worse and that's maybe one of the problems with finding the right lawyer, which is you have to have someone that can get a top secret clearance to actually work with these documents, because they can challenge, I suppose, whether they really are secret, right?
Yeah.
Right? So your point is you think that he has basically been absolved of any real liability as a accessory after the fact, I guess, is the technical nature of this, right?
The newspaper report I read simply said they're not going to charge him, that he was innocent. He didn't know that Trump was using this stuff that way, his advice that way. Excuse me. Interesting.
So then the last thing is, if you're representing the co-conspirator, this guy Waltine Nautow, the Navy guy who was the aide to Trump in Mar-a-Lago, who I guess was managing the process of moving these documents around.
Yeah.
How do you get him off in this case? How do you actually get him to win this case? I mean, he's probably going to be forgotten about long after whatever the outcome is here. But he's a co-conspirator, and allegedly, and he's in this case. He's got separate counsel. He's entering a plea shortly. I guess it's all happening in real time right now as we speak, like literally happening down in Miami. There's a live feed of what's going on, although it's not inside the courtroom. How do you imagine he's going to defend himself?
Trump told me it was okay to do this.
Trump and on the advice of Corcoran, like Corcoran gets pulled into it as, hey, I'm just following the advice of what I'm being told to do. And I understood there were lawyers that were dealing with that advice, right?
Yeah. This guy's a flunky. He was a little guy, and he's just moving boxes around. And who is he to challenge a former president who tells him, this is fine, just do what I tell you. Don't worry about it.
I mean, you have to say to yourself, you must imagine that he can't be happy with his life at this point, this Navy guy, that he's gotten dragged into this situation. You can't imagine that he's looking at this like, this was something I ever thought was even responsible. Here's what his pictures look like. That's him in his Navy uniform. I think that's his lawyer on the left of the screen. That's him on the right.
Well, welcome to the club. A lot of people who worked for Trump are in the same situation. Look at, Michael Cohen. He had to go to prison, and they're all over the place. The former Trumpies who Trumpy couldn't save or wouldn't save.
But these pictures make it look like he's almost Trump's valet, like he's fixing Trump's collar. I mean, to me, these pictures really tell a great story that this guy is just the flunky. He's not the decision maker. He's not deciding this stuff. He's following orders, right? I mean, to me, that's what it suggests. And, in general, they've got lots of pictures of him being near Trump and acting like his valet and moving stuff around. And he is named as the sole co-conspirator with Trump. And he's entering a plea, which I assume will be a not guilty plea, although I imagine they'll really work on him at some level to see whether he's willing to testify against Trump. And that's an interesting question that raises, how do these guys coordinate their defense together if that's something that they're going to do at all, right? If that's actually what's going to happen. I don't know. There's lots of pictures here.
You never know with these people.
Right. When you look at what's happening in the world today with a former president who's also running for office being named in a criminal indictment that follows a state tax criminal case that has a March trial date. And it's like a lineup of litigation, because as you said, there could be a case filed shortly in Georgia as well. When all is said and done, does it represent that the world is getting crazier and crazier? Because we would never have imagined this a few decades ago at all. It's your point about desensitization. I mean, I don't know what's next, but it seems like every day brings a new precedent with a new revelation. And are we essentially now two nations divided by completely different views of how the world should work? I mean, it's a sad statement about our republic, isn't it?
What you just posed, I think, is the most disturbing question of all. Have we really split into two nations, or has the split always been there? And it's just coming out. If you go, I read this very interesting book about the origins of our country. We were settled basically by four groups of English people from four different parts of Britain that were very, very different, and their values were conflicting from the beginning, and it's still happening. So it's kind of endemic to an immigrant country like the United States, which is not made up of a single ethnic or religious group, and it's just coming to a head in a terrible way. It's happening in other countries too, to some degree, in Israel and England, but I don't know how it's going to work out. And then, I don't spend time in this program about the current Supreme Court, but that's adding to this feeling of total polarization, that you're on one side or another, and the institutions we've traditionally depended on to be neutral and pro-democracy from a procedural point of view are being mistrusted. The press, the courts, the Supreme Court especially, and it's very disturbing. And for some of these things, you can kind of see a light at the end of the tunnel because things change. But these Supreme Court justices they're young people who are going to be there another 20, 30 years at least. How do we get over this? I see Gavin Newsom has proposed a constitutional amendment on gun control. He knows, and everybody knows, it's hopeless. You got to get 3/4 of the state to ratify, even if you get through 2/3 of both houses of Congress. But at least it's a rallying point. I think he's doing the right thing, but at least in the immediate future, it's not going anywhere.
Right. I mean, maybe the founders had in mind that a constitutional convention would be called every 10 or so years or 20 or so years because the document could be updated, because the document itself, the Constitution, along with the Bill of Rights and all the associated amendments, it really has a horrendous process of trying to get an amendment to actually occur, as you noted. And we're so polarized that you can't even imagine that you would get the required votes of the states to even get close to that process happening. So is there a defect in what the founders originally envisioned? Because they never envisioned the kind of polarization that would play out as more and more states were added to the union and as more and more desensitizing things occurred?
They didn't envision a population of 300 million. That's how do you have a constitutional convention that you can trust? I mean, some of us might go into such a convention with good motives, and you come out of it with, a monarchy. It could be anything. You don't know.
Right.
The kind of mix we have. So I don't think anyone's in favor of the constitutional convention. It's just a loose cannon that could go anywhere. Going through Congress is at least somewhat predictable, but the prediction has to be it ain't going to work right now, at least on something major like this. So how do you fix it? I mean, the only way to fix it is to go to the roots of it and deal with the polarization, not with laws, just with attitudes. And I'm not sure how you do that. I mean, one thing you need is a leader from the middle who can inspire people to, come on, knock it off. We're all Americans. We have some basic values that we all have. And I can think of only one point in our history where that happened.
The Civil War and Lincoln unifying the country?
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor was the only time there was no dissent, pretty much.
Okay, so your
before
point,
and after Pearl Harbor, no, it was all quarreling and fighting.
So your point is we may need some external forcing function of a common enemy, in that case, Japan.
I'm not encouraging it. I mean, 9/11 came close. That was the closest to Pearl Harbor we've had. But, I certainly don't wish anything like that. But that seems to be the only thing that unites us.
Some force, external force that says, hey, we're all Americans. We have a common enemy. Well, maybe it's time to unify and to put all grievances aside, right? So Myron, thank you very much for coming on board. We're out of time, but why don't you tell people how they reach you? Because you're one of the best appellate lawyers that exists nationally, because you do cases all over the country. I know you're doing cases in the federal circuits throughout the United States, civil cases mostly. Do you ever do some criminal cases as well?
Not very often. I deal with some stuff on the fringe of criminal, and once in a while. I was teaching law for a long time, and I retired about 8 years ago and set up this law firm that all we do is civil appeals. And I got 3 former appellate judges on my team and some former law clerks, and we do federal and state, all sorts of civil cases, tech cases, property cases, contract, whatever, appeals and writs. And I love it. I like it a lot more than I did dealing for law school. So
no disrespect for teaching law, but I'm sure grading exams was not your forte.
No, that wasn't my favorite. I'm more of a fighter than a scholar at heart, Jack. I've done the scholar. I was okay at it, but I'd much rather go into the arena and battle it out. And to me, it's just a lot of fun. So if anybody, we do a lot of consulting too on other people's cases, moot courts and reviewing draft briefs and that type of thing. And evaluating whether a case is worthwhile appealing. We do a lot of that. And so if anybody would like our help, just have them give me a call or send me an email. I'll be happy to help.
Tell folks how to reach you on the phone and what website to go to.
Sure. The name of the firm is Moskovitz Appellate Team. Just go to Moskovitz, got to spell it right, Moskovitz, Appellate Team. .com. You'll see our website. You can send me an email. You'll see the email address there. My phone number, direct line, 510-384-0354.
Yeah, and you pick up the phone directly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're pretty on the ball and basically responding. And I know you've helped a lot of people where you've just told them, look, you just don't, it's not going to be worth your time or their money. And so this is the website at Moskovitz Appellate Team. And as you say, there's no substitute for experience.
There's my judges right there.
Yeah, there you
go.
go.
Appellate judges.
There you go.
Three guys. I'm the little guy in the middle. The big guys are my former judges.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great firm. I think it's a great success rate. I think you probably have one of the best set of statistics out there, and this is the website to go to for more information. So I want to thank you for your time.
Right, thanks, Jack.
You're welcome. Talk to you later. Take care. Bye-bye, Myron.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.